All right, if in your note packet you will go to note 6-8, we are going to be talking about polynomials today. I'm going to leave that zoomed in. Okay, so a polynomial, this is just an expression consisting of many terms. Okay, some examples would be like 5. You could do x squared plus 1. You could do x to the third minus x plus 2. So like this only has one thing in it, this has 2 things in it, and this has 3 things in it. So they're all polynomials, so they can have one thing up to several things. Now, standard form, you are going to have to go in alphabetical order. And you go biggest to smallest degree. Okay, degree just means exponent. So biggest to smallest exponent. Okay, so I'm going to work the odds with you, and you have to do 2, 4, 6. So the way I'm going to look at this is I'm going to look at my letters. If you only have one letter, it's super easy. So I have an x. I look for the biggest exponent. Well, the biggest exponent is a 2. So therefore, that piece goes first. I just put 2x squared. I just bring it down. Okay, then, and remember, you always have to pull the sign in front. So I pulled that positive down. And then I look, I still have an x, so this is the next x piece. So I bring that down, and the sign in front of that is a positive 3x, so I don't need that one anymore. And then I just bring down plus 1. That is standard form, biggest exponent to smallest or non-existent exponent. Okay, for number 3, I've got w to the third plus 5w squared plus 28 minus w. Okay, so for this one, I start with my highest exponent, which is the 3. So w to the third, I write first. I don't need that anymore. The next highest exponent is this squared, so I put 5w squared. The next highest exponent is this 1, so I put minus w. And then the next highest would be the one without the exponent, so plus 28. Okay, moving on now to 2 letters. 2 letters can be tricky, so just listen to what I say. It's not hard, I promise. I have 2ab plus a to the third plus a squared b to the second minus 2b to the third. When you're doing this, you start with the letter that comes first, a. So every piece that has an a in it has to be written before other pieces. So I'm actually going to ignore this piece with just b. I don't want to do that until I take care of these 3 pieces first. So since I'm looking at these 3 pieces, the highest exponent that I see is the third. So I have to write this positive a to the third first, and then I'm not using it anymore. Now remember, we're not using this piece right now because I don't have an a in it. I have to do all my a's first. So the next highest a that I see is this a squared. So I'm going to bring down this plus 5a squared b squared. Okay, and then from there, I am going to cross that one off. I'm still not using this one because it doesn't have an a in it. So I only have one more piece with a in it. So I bring down plus 2ab. And then the only thing left is that minus 2b to the third. Now this exponent is bigger than those, but a still comes before b, so that's why you have to write it first. Now a degree, like I said, is just the highest exponent. Okay, the highest exponent. So when we're classifying, we classify by 2 things. When you're looking at the exponent, so degree means exponent. If there are no letters, that means this is constant. You don't have an exponent. If there is an x, but no exponent on it, that means there's a 1, so it is linear. If it has a squared on it, that is quadratic. If it has a 3 on it, that is cubic. And if there is a 4 on it, that is quartic. Okay, for number of terms, now this is where you're going to be looking at your plus and minus signs, how many things are in the problem. So if there is only one thing in the problem, we call this a monomial because mono means 1. If there are 2 things, we call it a binomial because bi means 2. 3 things would be a trinomial, because tri means 3, and 4 or more we call a polynomial. Okay, so I'm again just going to do these odds. You have to do the evens. So when you're doing this, you're going to use this cheat sheet right here. I have 6. I'm going to first look at the letter. There is no letter in this, so that means there's 0, so I'm going to write constant. And then I look to see if there's any plus or minus signs. Since there are not, there's only one thing in this problem, so that means it's a monomial. Okay, for number 9, I look at the letter first. I look at its exponent. Well, the exponent would be a 1 because they didn't write 1, so I go to 1. 1 means linear. And then I look at that plus sign to see how many things there are, and if I were to use that to split it, this would give me 2 things. So 2 things means it's a binomial. Okay, for number 11, I look at that 3, that a to the third. Actually, no, I'm not going to do 11. I'm going to do 12. Okay, for number 12, since this has multiple letters, you only look at the highest one, and since it's a 4, I'm going to go to 4, and 4 means quartic. Okay, since this is quartic, what you now have to do is you're going to use those signs. That splits it, that splits it, that splits it. This has 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, so 4 or more means it is a polynomial. Okay, so now y'all do 8, 10, and 11. And then we're going to flip to the back. And on the back, we're going to go over adding and subtracting polynomials, and I'm going to do half of them with you, and then you have half to try on your own, but give me 1 second. I need to pause this video to do something. Okay, so sorry about that. Now we're back to adding and subtracting. When you're adding and subtracting, all you're doing is combining like terms. So for an addition problem, you want to go in standard form. So that means start with the highest exponent. So the highest exponent that I see is a squared. And since I have a squared on both sides, you're going to take the coefficient, which means you're going to take -1 and add it to 2. So -1 plus 2, which just gives me 1x squared. I don't need this piece anymore. I don't need this piece anymore. And then the next highest exponent that I see is this 11x, and then there's a -5x. So you're doing 11 plus -5, which gives you 6. So you put plus 6x. You don't need that piece anymore, and you don't need that piece anymore. The last thing that you have left is a 13, and you are adding it to a -23, so plus -23. And that gives me -10, and that's how we do adding. Okay, when we're doing subtracting, you got to change it up just a little bit because this minus sign goes to each piece. So this is a -1. So we have to distribute that -1 to every piece. So I'm going to keep 4x squared plus 5x. But now this becomes a -7x, a -3x squared, and a -1. Now I go through and do that standard form. I'm going to start with the highest exponent first. So 4 plus -3 becomes a 1x squared. Don't need that piece, don't need that piece. 5 plus a -7 becomes a -2x. Don't need that piece, don't need that piece. And the only thing I have left is that -1. So now from here, what we are going to do is I am going to do the evens with you. So flipping it up. Okay, so since this one is a plus, we don't have to change anything. We're going to start with our highest exponent, which is a k squared. 1 plus 1 becomes 2, and then I have k squared. We're not changing the letters. Okay, don't need that piece, don't need that piece. Then I have a -4k and a +9k, so -4 plus 9 becomes a +5, and then I keep k. Don't need that piece anymore. And then the last thing I have is 7 plus -3, which would give me a +4. None of these 3 pieces will combine together, so I am done. Okay, for number 16, it's again addition, so I don't need to change anything. So I'm going to start alphabetical order this time. So x comes before y, so a 9 and a 3 make a 12x. Then I'm going to move to the y's. Don't need that, don't need that. A -5 and a +2 make a -3, and I keep that y. And then that minus 7 just gets brought down because it doesn't go with anything else. Okay, for 18, it's again a plus sign. So therefore, I don't need to change anything. I'm going to start with my highest exponent. Okay, the highest exponent is this third. I don't have any other thirds, so I'm going to just go ahead and bring that down and cross it off. Then I'm going to move to my squareds, which I have right here, and then there's no other squareds, so I just bring that down, cross it off. Okay, from here, I move to the a's. Well, I have a -5, a +1, and a -5. So if you want to do it all at once, you can do -5 + 1 + -5, which gives you -9, and you keep the a. Okay, moving down, just 4 more examples. So now we're in subtraction. Remember, there's a -1 here, so you need to distribute that. We're going to keep the 5r minus the 2s. This becomes -9r, and this becomes +11s. So alphabetical order, you have to QRS, so r comes first. So I have 5r and -9r. When I add those, that gives me a -4r. Don't need that, don't need that. Then I go to my -2s and my +11s, and when I add those, I get a +9s. Okay, for 22, again, this is a subtraction, so that means we have to distribute the -1. We're going to leave the first piece alone, 3m squared plus 7m minus 1. This becomes a -1m squared. This becomes a -2m, and this becomes a +5. So from here, I combine like terms. So I start with my highest exponent, which is that squared. So 3 plus a -1 becomes a 2m squared. Don't need that, don't need that. Moving to m, I have 7 and -2. So 7 plus -2 is a +5m. Don't need that, don't need that. And then the last thing I have left is this -1 and a +5. And -1 and +5 will add to give me +4. Okay, 24, 26, we're almost done. All right, for 24, I have 8x minus 3y. I need to distribute this -1. So I'm going to actually go ahead and pull down 8x minus 3y because that's not changing. And then -1 times 2y is a -2y. -1 times -13 is a +13. And -1 times 5x is a -5x. From here, alphabetical order, so x goes first. An 8 and a -5 make 3x. Don't need that anymore, don't need that anymore. Then I move to my y. I have a -3y and a -2y, which when I add will make a -5y. And the only thing left is that +13. These 3 things don't go together, so you're done. Okay, our last example is a written one. Subtract 2w squared from minus 5w plus 10 from w to the third plus 6w squared minus 2. Now, remember, when you're doing subtraction, that from always goes first. So we're actually doing w to the third plus 6w squared minus 2 minus 2w squared minus 5w plus 10. Okay, we have to distribute this -1. So this piece stays the same. And then a -1 times 2w is a -2w squared. A -1 times -5w is a +5w. And a -1 times 10 is a -10. So from here, we combine like terms. We're going to start with that highest exponent, which I see a third. And there's no other thirds, so I'm going to just keep w to the third. And then I move to my squareds, which I have a 6w squared and a -2w squared. So when I add those, that becomes a +4w squared, because 6 plus -2. Don't need those, don't need those. And now I move to w. All I have is that 5w, so I can't add it to anything, so I just keep it. And then the last thing that I have is the -2 and the -10. And when I add those, that becomes -12. Okay, so now I need y'all to complete your examples, and if you have questions, ask.